It's time to engage, educate, and empower with Tracey Maxfield.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower, the podcast which aims to highlight and discuss some of the life challenges, social issues, and problems that our kids are facing on a daily basis. Now, as you know, every week we have a special guest, and this week is no exception, but it is also Mental Health Awareness Week, which is a really important week where we highlight and openly discuss mental health, mental illness or disorders, and suicide. Now, personally, I think it should be a 365-day topic, because when you live with a mental illness or a mental problem or a mental health challenge, however you like to word it, it doesn't appear just for 1 week a year. It's with you day in, day out. And some days you can have good days and other days are not so good. And so today's special guest is going to be talking about mental illness, specifically the mental health challenges that he has experienced since he was a young child and continues to experience as an adult. So my very special guest today is Tommy Dahlborg. And if the name sounds familiar, it's because we had his father Thomas on our very, very first podcast back on, oh my goodness, March 19th. Can't believe we've been going this long. Anyway, Tommy, he's a young guy. He is a staunch mental health advocate, a podcaster, and he actually has his own podcast, Strength Through Vulnerability, where he shares his struggles with mental health. He also discusses what holistic health is and why is it so important. He's a lover of puppies, aren't we all? And the New England Patriots. But most of all, he is a brother and a son. I love it. So stay tuned. We'll be taking a very quick commercial break, and when we return, it'll be my pleasure to introduce you to Tommy Dahlborg. Stay tuned.
Tracey Maxfield is a retired nurse with over 36 years' experience in mental health and dementia. She has spent years studying, researching, and writing on dementia care, mental illness, and bullying in teenagers. Tracey struggled with chronic depression starting in her 20s, and after years of intense workplace stress, bullying, and harassment, her chronic depression intensified. Tracey wrote her book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole: My Journey Through Depression, as a way not to only relieve her stress and anxiety, but to help her friends and family better understand depression. The book became an international guide for mental health awareness, allowing Tracey to focus her attention on helping children, teenagers, and their parents work through mental health issues and bullying. She travels all over the world to meet with schools, mental health advocates, and experts in the mental health fields. She also offers online courses to help children, teenagers, and their parents work through issues, bringing families closer and to bring awareness to bullying in society. For more information on Tracey, her mission, the show, Tracey's book, and offered courses, visit traceymaxfield.com. You can see the latest news on mental health, upcoming guests on the podcast, read Tracey's blogs and articles, and more. Plus, follow Tracey all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to watch the podcasts. See her daily messages and motivation, and learn about each podcast guest and experts. Plus, while you're on the website at traceymaxfield.com, be sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Follow Tracey with her upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles discussing important mental health topics and issues. And when you subscribe, you'll get a free copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. Just go to traceymaxfield.com. Tracey is committed to bringing parents and their children closer, to battle bullying and bring awareness to the mental health of children. That's why Tracey is offering her online courses to any adults, parents, children, and teenagers struggling during those hard times. Sign up for the course at traceymaxfield.com. You'll receive 8 full modules, over 12 videos, resources, and support discussing mental health, mood disorders, eating disorders, behavioral disorders, social media, drugs, suicide, risks and signs, and much, much more. Plus, you'll get access to Tracey's private Facebook group for individuals going through the same thing you are. Connect with others and share ideas, support, and motivation with Tracey helping along the way. Tracey's online courses is now for a limited time available for only $158. See all information online at traceymaxfield.com, where a brighter future is possible.
Welcome back, everybody. And as promised, I would love to introduce you to Tommy Dahlborg. Welcome so much.
Thank you, Tracey. I'm so excited to be on. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. And actually, I was thinking, as I was looking at you, I can see the similarities with your dad.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, yes.
Oh, I love it. That's a good thing.
A younger Thomas, yes. I was just saying, when I introduced you in the first part, I did tell everyone that you are the son of Thomas Dahlborg, who was actually the very first guest we had when the podcast premiered back March 19th. And here we are, it's May. And this is a very, very important week because it's Mental Health Awareness Week. And I know this is a subject that is very near and dear to your heart and something that you actually discuss in your own podcast, Strength Through Vulnerability. So please share your journey. Your dad gave us little hints when he was obviously talking about his book, which is obviously The Big Hit in Basketball, about you and your relationship with your dad. But I understand that when you were very young, you had some mental health issues, which then led to a lot of adult bullying. So tell us your story.
Yeah. Oh, man. You know, my dad tells this great story of when I was only 4 years old. I went over to my neighbor's house and I knock on the door, ring the doorbell just to go and hopefully see my friends and play with them. And the adult opens, I think it was my friend's mom opens the door and basically says to me that, Tommy, you're too big, so you got to go home. And I went home and immediately told my parents what was going on while I was crying. And you know, it's funny. My dad tells that story so great. As myself now, I don't really remember too much of that day. I remember going over to my friend's house. I remember being at the door, but I don't remember anything of what she said now, but I definitely remember how I felt.
Yes.
And it was probably one of the first times that I've really been rejected in my life, you know? And, and so time goes on and I did grow up being a bigger kid, and there continued to be bullying throughout elementary school, middle school, into high school. And I just became incredibly insecure about my weight and what people thought of me, whether I was good enough, whether I was worthy. And that's something that I still battle with. Insecurities that I still deal with come all the way from when I was 4 years old.
Oh, 100%. I mean, to have that rejection at 4, when we look up to adult figures, yes, I mean, I did not have a very nice childhood, and so endured rejection really from the beginning. But it doesn't matter. You still want to have that validation and love and support. And you're right when you said, I don't actually remember what was said, but I remember how it made me feel. At Maya Angelou, that's one of her most famous statements. People will not remember what you said or what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And I think as a society, we've kind of lost sight of that, because, you know, words can hurt, but once they're imprinted in your brain, they stay there. I refer to them as acid burns. You
I
know,
like that. Yeah, yeah,
they're still there, that scar's there, and every now and again something happens and it just opens it up,
yeah. Hmm.
and it's like you're reliving it all over again.
Hmm.
Now, what your dad did share, and obviously, if this is not something that you would want to talk about, but he did say that you had recently confided that you had thought of suicide because it was getting so overwhelming and difficult
Hmm.
dealing with all this rejection and bullying.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. Yeah, that was in fourth grade that I don't know what was going through my head, but I was so sad, so depressed that one day I put a belt around my neck in my bedroom and luckily didn't do anything about it, but I totally thought about
Yeah.
killing myself that day. And looking back, I'm like, what was going on in that little boy's head? I remember fourth grade that happened. I remember it was the first time I ever went on a diet. And it's like, how many fourth graders are going on diets? Like, I was
Nice.
clearly hearing a lot from adults, probably coaches at the time too, and my peers.
Yes.
Which, yeah, led me to that day putting a belt around my neck. And of course, I'm so glad that I didn't do
Yeah,
anything. But
absolutely.
Um, but yeah, I'm also really, really lucky and so grateful that I have the parents that I do, that even though it took me, gosh, however many years that was to tell them about that day, I'm so grateful that I have parents that I can tell difficult stuff like that too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and certainly, as you know, as I know, and I keep reinforcing to everyone that no matter what you're going through and how dark it seems, please reach out to somebody. There
Hmm.
is somebody out there that will help you, that will offer you the hand and guide you. And it's, I mean, a reason why I wrote my book. I
Hmm.
think it's the reason why your dad wrote his book. It was to show everyone that they're not alone, that
Yeah.
there are so many that have been in their shoes and have lived their pain, and that there is hope. And I think this is something as a society we always need to hold on to, the hope. I think because
Hmm.
if we lose hope, I think we're just going to run amok and it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
But uh, when you were growing up, did you have a best friend, or did you have a small group of friends that were supportive, or were you really just seen almost as the outsider because you were quote unquote the big kid?
Mm. So it's kind of funny. Growing up, I think I always had a best friend. I
Good.
always managed to have a best friend who happened to usually be in the popular crowd, right?
Okay. Good.
And and while me and my best friend were actually like really great friends, some of the people that were in the group of friends that we had were the ones who were actually bullying me. So it's just interesting that, I had this loving friendship with my best friend, but that friendship kind of brought me closer to people who didn't make me feel good about myself at the same
Right.
time. So I'm glad that, I had those solid people in my life, but at the same time, there's still always going to be those difficult people there too.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I agree. It doesn't matter where you are, what you do, you're always going to encounter not so nice people.
Hmm.
And that could be from children, teenagers, adults to the much older person. And I think one of the challenges is that uh, today in school, we're not educating and actually instilling values in children, and also resilience.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that that's a reason why we're having so many problems now, but I think if we're not showing kids how to deal with criticism and stress, and that you're never always going to get your way. You know, if you're trying out for the football team, you may not get picked. That does
Hmm.
not mean you are less a person. It
Hmm.
just means that maybe next time you have to train a little harder, or, you know, I always look at things that happen as learning opportunities. I think that's the only way we can, because if we think about it too long and hard, I always call them the ants in the brain. The automatic negative thoughts will take off, and
Mm,
you'll start berating and bullying and picking on yourself, and you know, we are our own worst enemies. And then
mhm,
what may have been one little thing suddenly becomes multiple things, because you pull on every bad thing that's ever happened in your life, and you sit there and you think, I'm hopeless, I'm pathetic, I'm not worthy, why am I living? And
mhm,
that starts off that, you know, slippery slope and descent into the dark hole.
mhm,
So as you're growing up and you do have a best friend and you've got very supportive parents, like they're awesome.
mhm,
You have a sister.
mhm,
Um, you also obviously still have to connect with friends that are not so pleasant.
mhm.
But did your depression or anxiety get to a point where you needed to seek some medical help, or was it just something that was just kind of almost like a chronic form of depression, which was there, and some days it would get bad, but you kind of just continue to muddle through?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's interesting because as a younger kid, I can't really remember the feeling of anxiety of, you know, aside from that moment in fourth grade. I don't
Mhm.
really remember specifically being depressed until seventh grade. And I remember this was a really difficult time for me because if you know me, I'm pretty outgoing. I'm boisterous might not be the best word, but I definitely like having fun and like being kind of loud.
Yeah.
And yet, my seventh and eighth grade years, I became so quiet and timid and basically afraid. And you said something earlier about resilience, and I think that there's a part of resilience where like you need to learn how to deal with not always getting your way,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
also at the same time learning to love yourself through it.
Yes.
And I think that seventh grade was probably the beginning of me learning a little bit about that. I remember one specific day, one of these guys who used to be in that friend group with my best friend and I, he was walking next to me going down to the cafeteria, and we're talking, we're catching up, and we get in the cafeteria, and I don't sit with him and the popular kids back in middle school. I go and sat with some kids that were in theater who were not popular,
Of course.
but they made me feel so good about myself because they were just nice
Yes.
and the other kids weren't. And I remember him being like, dude, why are you sitting with them? And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, you don't know what you're missing, man. These guys are awesome. Like this is where life is. And to go along with that, I remember, so that happened in seventh grade. And I remember driving home from somewhere with my dad. And I told him, I was like, Dad, I think that I feel anxious. And that was kind of a radical term back then because it was, I feel
Yes.
like talk about anxiety is still just kind of becoming a
Hmm.
thing. And you know, at the time, my dad, totally coming from the right place, was like, Tommy, don't worry about it. It's all just in your head. And you know, in a sense, that's kind of true, but it's also not the most helpful thing at the
Right.
same time, right? Because it's at least real to you, and those feelings are real. So
Right.
I think that was the first time that I really recognized that I was feeling anxious, that my mental health wasn't spot on.
Right.
And it wasn't for a long time until I actually sought out help. It wasn't until my senior year in college, so like years later,
Yeah.
where I got to a point where I just didn't know how to deal with the anxiety. I didn't know how to deal with the feelings of depression, that resilience that we just talked about. It wasn't really there.
Right.
If a difficult task came up, I would just get stressed and not know what to do with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And, you know, luckily at that time I was in a toxic relationship, but the girl I was dating had actually seen somebody in the past herself for anxiety. So she was actually the force that encouraged me to go and see somebody myself. And that's when I reached out to my parents and kind of told them a little bit about what was going on. And they recommended a really great friend who's a psychiatrist. And I went to him starting my senior year in college, and it's been so helpful. And
Yes.
I just try to emphasize to people that if you're struggling, like you said earlier, reach out for help, because there are people who are there who want to and will help you.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting because, yes, your dad was right. It is all in our head, right? It
Hmm.
literally is. It begins
Yeah.
in our brain, but that doesn't make it any easier when you're trying to articulate what's
Yes.
going on. And I know this is what so many kids are struggling with today, is that, and what I'm hoping, like people like you and I, your dad, and the podcast is going to do is create that awareness and that education that, guess what?
Mm.
Kids do have mental illness.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And when they come to you and say, I'm feeling really sad, or I'm feeling really nervous or anxious, or I feel hot and sweaty and shaken and I don't know why, that instead of, the retort of, oh, you'll be fine, oh, it's just a stage, oh, it's in your head or something, that they'll take a slightly different approach. Because I
Mm.
know, as you know, with lots of kids, as soon as some comments are made like that, they rarely open up about it again in case it is shut down, or
Mm.
they begin to believe, well, they think I'm fine, so I must be fine. But the confusion begins then. But why don't I feel fine? What's wrong with me? And again, and when we start talking about it like that, it's like it's so very crystal clear how you can see that the child, the teenager, starts that change of the anxiety and the depression is actually not going to go away. It will continue to get worse.
Mhm.
And this is what they're finding right now, is such a high incidence of college students. When they get to college, everything that they've ever experienced throughout the school years, and they've managed to hold it together, or believe that when they've gone to college that everything will be okay, and all of a sudden they're faced with life situations and stressful situations, because most of them are moving away from home, so they're living on their
Mhm.
own. Even if you're in a frat house or a dorm, you may be surrounded by people, but you still have some of the life stressors. And
Mhm.
then the work expectations, and if you're in a different city, and everything seems to collide. And they're noticing such a huge number of college students are seeking mental health, and it is for anxiety disorders, it
Mhm.
is for depression, high suicide risk, and suicidal thoughts and ideation. And also, colleges is sometimes the time when someone who's been living with schizophrenia but really hasn't had it diagnosed,
Mhm.
that's when that seems to present itself. That really stressful change of environment kind of kickstarts it, and it comes out
Mm.
with a vengeance. And so, I guess what I'm trying to say to people that are watching and listening to this is, um, if we go upstream and start helping our kids when they start mentioning, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling confused, I'm hearing voices. If you take it seriously and give them the support, chances are they'll transition through to college with flying colors,
Mm.
because they're going to be so better able to manage their symptoms and have a much better understanding of maybe what their triggers are.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard when there's so many college dropouts, because something has happened and it's all of a sudden, I can't cope with this. And again, it begins that slippery slope of, maybe I'll try drugs and alcohol, maybe that'll make me feel better. And you
Mhm.
start engaging in things because society is telling you, and everyone's been telling you, well, everything is fine, you're fine,
Mm.
what do you mean? So, I mean, and again, it brings it back to the stigma, which is exactly what your podcast is doing, is, it's opening the door so we can all start talking about, guess what? Um, we all at one time are going to have a mental health challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It does not necessarily mean we will end up with an anxiety disorder or suicidal thoughts or depression. But this is life. There's no way anyone can sail through life and say, no, I'm fine. Nothing's happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, death, failing an exam, not getting into the football team, breaking up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend after a long-term relationship.
Mm-hmm.
We call it mental distress. It's a mental health challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So what prompted you that's a very brave step to do a podcast.
Thank you. You're doing it too, and you're doing them great.
I know, and I would say we're both doing it because we want to send a message.
Totally.
And so, strength through vulnerability. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you've said so many good things. I want to go back to something that you were talking about with parents, and when you hear about what your child is going through, when they come to you, instead of poo-pooing it or just trying to affirm them, tell them that they're fine, that research and trying to really dig into what's going on is so important. I heard this thing the other night, and this person was saying that you can't have empathy without understanding.
Yes.
And I love that. And it's just so important. And that's why the parents need to really dig into what these things are so they can get an idea of what their child's going through, especially if they've never gone through something like that.
Yes.
And so, along with that, Brene Brown, who's a researcher at the University of Houston, I think.
I was just going to say, every single kid in school should sit through Brene Brown's videos.
Yes, seriously.
Seriously. Because she captures what are the values that we all should instill, not only in ourselves, but in our children.
Yes.
But I love her. She's amazing. Yes.
Oh, me too. And what she has to say about shame and how shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot survive empathy. It emphasizes how important that understanding is.
Yes.
And everybody who deals with mental health, for the most part, has shame around it because of the stigma that's built up, because of the times that they've been told that, oh, you're okay, but they still feel like they're not okay. And so that's what so much of Strength Through Vulnerability is about. I want my podcast to be a place where I want it to be a safe platform for people to share their stories. And it's also a platform where I share a bit of my story too. And I truly believe in the strength of vulnerability. You mentioned earlier that knowing that you're not alone is so powerful and so important. And that's one of the things that I try to drive home in every episode, is that you're not alone. Maybe I haven't dealt with exactly what you're going through, but somebody has. And that person wants to talk to you. They want to help you. And that's why I want this to be a platform for those people to speak. Because the more that we're vulnerable and share these difficult things, the more we break down those walls, the more we break down that stigma.
I 100% agree, and kudos to you. It's awesome, because even if we don't have the answers, it certainly has helped that we have walked the walk and talked the talk. But again, what my experience, every experience is unique. I can begin to understand and totally empathize with your experience. But it is still your lived experience, and likewise with me. But because we've been to the anxiety, suicide, bullying, depression, you have that inherent sense of what you needed and what that other person needs. And it's the support, and that you're not alone. And also, and bringing up Brené Brown again, it's the being there and listening. And sometimes you don't even have to respond. But if you're listening to the person and you're sitting close enough, and I believe touch is extremely important, and it's just a touch on the arm, or an arm around the shoulder, or a touch on the shoulder, that's such powerful connection, and you're there with the person. And I've mentioned it in an earlier podcast. She does an amazing video about what empathy is. Have you seen it? Where I think it's an animal, a cartoon animal is sitting down a rabbit hole and is very, very depressed. And there are two, I think it's rabbit friends above looking down. And one of them takes a ladder and climbs down and sits beside the rabbit, the person in the dark, and says, I am here for you. And the other one is standing at the top, shouting down, going, yoo-hoo, anything you need, just call me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's showing not empathy for people to understand. And it is, I think it's just that being there. And sometimes being there does not necessarily, if you're not able to be there in person, it's that being there by computer. So, the Skype or the text or the phone call, it's that person that whatever time of day or night, whatever's going on in your world, you could contact that person and they will be there. And I think that is the most important thing. And so as it is Mental Health Awareness Week, I think both of us agree an important message is, if you know someone, reach out to them and be there, be that rock for them. And similarly, if you are the person that's sitting there thinking, you know what, I think maybe I have depression, or I think I don't feel so good, reach out.
Yes.
Reach out, because seriously, I did this on my own because I'd just gone through a divorce and everything that had happened in the workplace. And I still had, I knew I had people that I could reach out to. And I think that's very important. Even if it's your counselor, your doctor, a neighbor, it doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily have to be a friend or a family member. But if you know there is someone, and for children, teenagers, an adult role model in your life.
Yeah.
I think every child, every teenager needs to have that safe, respectful adult role model who's got their back and is going to be there. Reach out. Please, you don't need to do this alone. Pain is easily shared and understood.
I love that. And you made me think of a couple things too. You said that you think that physical touch is so important, and I totally agree. Now, I'm a 200-pound, 6-foot guy, so I'm like pretty big. And my older sister, she always jokes that I give the best hugs. I give bear hugs.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm living with my little sister in Maine. And sometimes when I'm having a difficult day, the thing that I need the most is a hug from my little sister. And she is like 90 pounds. She's tiny, but she gives the best hugs because I know that she cares.
Yes.
And I know she loves me. So finding that person,
yes,
loves you and you can trust, that's huge. And you also made me think too about, I just watched this movie called Lars and the Real Girl. Have you ever seen that before?
No, I haven't. No, I
Okay.
haven't. No, I'm going to have to watch it.
You should. It's brilliant. Very interesting movie. It's about this guy who he's played by Ryan Gosling. His name is Lars. Okay. Yeah. And my gosh, Ryan Gosling does a great job in this role because he plays a younger brother who's 27 and he's delusional. Okay. And he's dating this doll. He basically thinks that this doll is actually his girlfriend. Okay. Yeah. And so towards the end of the film, something really tragic happens, and I won't say what happens so that I don't spoil it for you. But the community around him just came over to his house one day, and Lars was like, forget exactly what his reaction was, but he felt like he needed to do something or say something. He's like, "Are we going to talk?" And one of the community members, this tough old woman from the church that he goes to, she's just like, Lars, sometimes in times of tragedy, you just need to sit. And I loved that. I was like, that's so powerful and so real and simple, but hard.
Yes.
So I just think you're spot on. Sometimes it really just takes being in the same room with somebody,
Yeah,
letting them know that you love them.
it does. And I think this maybe is why so many people are saying, well, I don't know what to do and I don't know what to say. What if I
Mm,
say the wrong thing? And it's like, no, because sometimes words are not necessary, really.
yes.
When I know for me personally, when the depression was so bad that I couldn't even think properly, and
Mhm,
every thought, and I know what you say, at college, everything was just so overwhelming.
mhm,
It's like I can't process anything. So really having someone sitting next to me offering constant reassurance and positivity was not what I wanted,
mm,
because the brain was so overwhelmed. It was just like chatter and
mhm.
noise. And sometimes you just want peace, you just want stillness, but you can feel that body warmth, that connection right there.
Yes.
And and it's strange to describe, but it immediately gives you peace. It does. It is comforting, because we all pick up on body language, and you'll know if the person sitting next to you does not want to be there.
Yeah, totally.
You will know, and please tell them, go back. Tell,
Yeah.
honestly, because what happens is that you start to make them feel better, and it doesn't help you.
Mm,
So it's when I say to people, you don't know what to do, phone them up and invite them for a cup of coffee. If they don't want to go, then go over to their house with coffee.
mm,
Take a treat and say, you know what? We don't have to sit and have a chat. I'm going to make the tea. I'm going to sit right next to you, and we're going to have tea together. And if it's silent, it doesn't matter. I need you to know I'm here for you. That does so much. That empowers the person so much
mm,
that there is so much comfort and trust in the ability to sit next to someone and not even say a word, but be sharing a moment over a cup of tea of stillness. But it conveys so much love and support. And I
mm,
think that's what people need to understand. We're not asking you to come and cure us. We're not asking you to try and make the day brighter. We're
mhm,
asking you to be loving and understanding on our terms.
mhm.
And sometimes it is just sitting there with a cup of tea or cup of coffee.
Totally. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I think sometimes it's the same with kids. Um, if you have a child or a teenager that is really struggling, they most of the time they will not want to talk,
Mm,
because they're trying to understand their emotions. But if you take the time to go and be with them in their space, so if they're lying on their bed, then you go in, and if you don't want to sit on the bed, sit on the floor, because I think it's really important that people to understand you need to get on the same level.
mm,
Because when you're standing up looking down, it's authoritarian and it's
yes.
uncomfortable. So get on their level. And, sometimes you may just be flicking through comic books or a book or looking at art or something. But what, and the conversation could be something like, I know you don't want to talk, but I want you to know how proud I am and how much I love you. And I'm here for you. And whatever you need, I need you to know I'm here. And over time, if you keep doing that, over time, you may find that your kid starts opening up,
Mm,
because it's trust, and it's not a one-off. And this is important. You've got to keep doing it, because lots of kids perceive that your life is so busy and stressful that they don't want to bother you. They don't want to add to what you're going through.
mhm.
But doing so not only helps you and strengthens the relationship, but it can do so much for the child, the teenager, because they will eventually start opening up.
Yeah.
And once they open up, that's when help can be sought. And sadly, there's been so many kids that have chosen to end their life by suicide. And we need to stop that. I mean, we're losing a generation of kids, and like the suicide rate is it's the second leading cause of death in kids aged 5 to 24 in the world. Isn't that horrific?
It's awful.
It's horrific. And next year, I guarantee you, it's going to be the leading cause of death. No, it has to stop. And I think that's why podcasts like yours are so important. There's so many awesome people like your dad. Everyone is sharing their story and their lived experience, and we're reaching out. Our hands are here. You can take them at any time. We want to help. So getting back to, as you know, my focus is children and teenagers. As a young guy yourself, because I'm old enough to be your mother, quite easily.
Oh my gosh.
Watching this, there could be parents or a parent of a child of a teen who they think is being bullied or struggling with anxiety or feeling really sad. Or it could actually be a teenager sitting, watching this. You're able to relate more because you're still in that age dynamic. Your experience is still recent. Knowing what you went through and where you are today, what would you say to them? How can you guide them?
To the parents, I would say, just be with them. I think that you really hit the nail on the head. Is that the right phrase?
That's the right phrase.
There we go. I think you really nailed it when you say that you need to meet them where they're at, go to their level. I remember some of the best moments for me were when I was just laying on my bed feeling depressed and unworthy, and my mom would just come in and just lay down next to me.
Yes.
Whether she would say anything or not, it was amazing because I knew she loved me. She was just there. She also really helped me to have a healthy relationship with crying, which I think is something hard for men.
Yes,
we don't want to be seen crying. But I actually see crying as one of my favorite stress relievers now, and that's majorly because of my mom telling me that it's okay to cry.
Yes.
So I think that's the message. Meet your kids where they're at, and whether that involves talking or not. To the kids, to the college students, middle school, high school, elementary, wherever you're at, it's to actively seek out someone you can trust and talk to. And I say actively on purpose because a lot of times I think we can just kind of sit in our own thoughts and just be like, I wish there's somebody I could talk to, or even just contemplate. But you really need to be active and seek out whoever that is. If you have a parent who is a good parent and wants to talk to you and is there for you, use them, talk to them, open up. But not everybody has the luxury that I have of 2 great parents, let alone 1. So maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's your gym teacher, maybe it's your baseball coach, but actively seek out somebody you can reach out to and know that you're not alone.
I agree. And it could be your best friend's mom or dad.
Yeah.
A neighbor, grandpa. There is somebody, but please reach out. Reach out. And once that happens, life will start getting better for you. You really will. I always talk about coming out of the darkness and seeing a speck of light. Yeah. I never ever thought it would happen when I was down the rabbit hole. I can tell you it will. It will. But you won't be able to do this alone. And that's not because you're weak. It's because when you're dealing with bullying or where you're dealing with a mental illness, it can be so overwhelming as you're trying to deal with everything else that life is throwing at you. And honestly, I'm 56. I would find it very difficult to be a teenager today because they are having to deal with so many adult situations, pressures, and exposed to so much that I never was. And so, I am constantly in awe of what teenagers have to go through and how they get through it and navigate the system. But you need help. You can't
Totally.
do everything on your own, and just that support, even if it gives you the guidance and the strategies for you to figure out another plan, that's awesome.
Hmm.
But there is someone out there. And so, Mental Health Awareness Week. I said at the very beginning, I feel it should be 365 days a year.
Yeah, right.
but
Agreed.
I understand we're in a society where, you know, we really only have the opportunity to create awareness about a specific topic per week, and there's only 52 weeks in the year.
Yeah.
So I think, to people that are listening and thinking, why should I come and check out his podcast? What would you say to them?
I'd say because it's real and it's my story and it's stories of people going through stuff just like you. And
And
we want to help.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
And
you're
what I
fine.
also wanted to say is, both of us advocate for holistic approach.
Hmm.
I think, and what I like about your podcast is that is discussed as well. Counseling is important, 100%. If you have to take medications, then there is a reason why the psychiatrist or doctor has started you on them. It does not necessarily mean you're going to be on them for the rest of your life. They
Hmm.
may just be something as a temporary measure. But to get truly well, there are so many other things to look at. And so I'm going to pass it to you. Holistic health, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Oh, holistic health. I love it. So to me, it's focusing on the spirit, the mind, and the body. And gosh, a lot of my journey started with the body.
Mhm.
I was, like we mentioned earlier, bullied for so long about being heavy that eventually that became an area where I really put some work in, and I ended up losing 80 pounds. And it's funny because at my heaviest, I was 273. And now I fluctuate in the 190 somewhere. And despite losing the 80 pounds, once I got there, I realized, wow, I'm still anxious and I'm still not super happy about myself. And that's when it became so clear that, okay, taking care of my body is super important. Eating well, getting the sleep, that helps so much.
Definitely.
But there's stuff that needs to be taken care of in your head too, Tommy. And
Yes.
and that's when I ended up seeking out professional help. And when I talk about spiritual health, that can mean a lot of different things for
Yes.
different people. They can dive into their faith and maybe they have a really great faith-based community. We're human. Humans are designed to be around people, right? So like wherever you can have good community, go there. That's important.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And whether it's meditation or I've been taking cold showers every morning because when you take a cold shower, it kind of makes your body feel like you're going to have a panic attack and you force yourself to breathe through it. And to me, all of those things are mind, body, and spirit. And you need to focus on all of them to be a holistic person.
I agree.
So yeah, that's what I think about holistic health. I think it's everything.
I agree. It's mindfulness as well. It's
Yes.
gratitude. You can journal, creatively express yourself in art, poetry, music. I think the biggest thing is for true healing is it's learning to love yourself
Mm,
and accepting yourself and all the wonderful gifts you have to offer, because I believe every single person has a gift.
yeah.
And unfortunately, so many people don't draw on their gifts or don't fully utilize them out of fear,
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe because they're so caught up in doing other things that it's not something that they can embrace right now. But we all have a place in this world. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when we start appreciating ourselves and what the world offers. And that's your mindfulness. I mean, meditation, that's another thing. It's getting to realize that you are part of something that's much, much more, much greater. but you're still a very essential part of that, and to live your best life. So, Tommy, I've actually run over by a little bit, but that's not a problem. I'll make my outro short.
I love it. There we go.
It's been an absolutely wonderful conversation, and said we can dig even deeper. There's so much more when when people start sharing their stories. There's so much more that we both understand, because we've kind of been on that same path, and then there's very unique things that have also happened to us. So before we take a commercial break, two things. First of all, I want to thank you so very, very much for being on the show, and especially during Mental Health Awareness Week. I think it's really important that we keep spreading the message that there's no shame in having a mental illness, and that there is someone out there who will offer you support, guidance, and be there.
I totally agree. And thank you so much for having me. I love your passion around all of this, and it's been a blast talking to you. So I hope you have me back on, because I'd love to talk some more.
Oh, definitely. You are. I had to make the same promise to your dad.
Awesome.
Because there's so much more to share, and an hour just doesn't have that opportunity. But returning guests definitely are on the list. And actually, before we go to commercial break, where you'll actually see all the social media links and also the link to connect with Tommy through his podcast. Because it is Mental Health Awareness Week, I am going to offer 2 signed copies of my book, Escaping the Darkness, My Journey Through Depression. So what you need to do, if you'd like a copy, is go to my website, www.traceymaxfield.com, click on the contact form, and I want you to send me, obviously, your name and email and your mailing address, but I want you to tell me, what is the name of Tommy's podcast?
I love it.
So if you haven't listened, you need to go back to the beginning now and listen.
So good.
So thank you so much again, Tommy. I'm going to take a very quick commercial break, and I'll be right back.
Tommy Dahlborg is a mental health advocate and a podcaster. Tommy is the host of the podcast Strength Through Vulnerability, where he talks about his struggles with mental health, the importance of holistic medicine and holistic health, along with personal interests. In his podcast, he helps listeners come to terms with mental health illnesses, going through the grieving process in difficult times, and helping individuals during stressful times, whether it be financial, personal, relationship, or societal. He talks about vulnerability, honesty, and the desire to help other people. He also helps individuals work through the emotional numbness of isolation and being able to process emotions in a healthy way. Find Tommy's podcast on apple.com, titled Strength Through Vulnerability. You can also find him on social media at facebook.com/Tommy.Dahlborg, on Instagram at Tommy Dahlborg Jr., and on LinkedIn also at Tommy Dahlborg Jr.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show today with Tommy Dahlborg. I did. What a really, really inspiring and kind soul. Really great guy, like his dad. So this wraps up this week's episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower. And as it is Mental Health Awareness Week, what I want to say to you is, please, if you are sitting there and you're struggling with emotions, feelings you don't understand, if you have a confirmed mental illness or mental disorder, or you're just experiencing some very stressful life events, please reach out to someone. And to those of you who know of someone who is having a difficult time, after this podcast, please, if they live close by, go drop by and pay them a visit. Give them a phone call, do a Skype chat, or just send a text. Please check in on them. Let them know that you were there for them, and you will always be there, and that you love and support them, because that's what this world needs. Kindness, love, and having someone who's on our side and in our corner and just being there. So thank you again for joining me. Have a lovely week, everybody, and I'll see you again next week for Engage, Educate, and Empower.